You're listening to the Recovered Life Show, the show that helps people in recovery live their best recovered lives. And here is your host, Damon Frank.
And welcome back to the Recovered Life Show. So good to be with you here today. I am so pleased to invite our guest on. And our guest is a very special person and is going to be talking about transformation in recovery. And I've been following this person for a while on TikTok, and I'm so glad that I was able to have her on the show because she's a very inspiring person. So without further ado, I'm just going to head right into this. Ennovy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on. You have no idea how honored I am to be on with you today.
Well, we're more honored to have you on, and I am so thrilled that we can have this discussion. You know, typically we have a really kind of a firm topic that I usually want to do with people that I'm like, but for you, there was so much stuff because we've been following each other on our live streams for a while. And I know you were watching the show at some point, and I didn't know that you were. And it's been great to get to know you, but your story is so beneficial. So I want to dive into that because you just celebrated 10 years. Congratulations. You know, huge applause for that. And you know, the journey that you've traveled and now you're working with other people is just absolutely amazing. Can you take us back to what the old you was like? Because I have a hard time seeing that. But it's true. At one point, you were not the person that's sitting in front of us.
No. It's funny because in my day job, I actually work in the same environment that I used to do drugs in. I look out the window and it's very much a full circle moment because I will literally look out the window and I see there's a park that's across the street. And I used to sit in that park. I used to do some things in that park that I'm not proud of. And I would do drugs in that park. And to be on the other side as a social worker and looking and kind of seeing what I see now is just like, wow, you're back here, but you're now here to help other people. And I feel really honored because a lot of times when you're doing that, it can kind of trigger those feelings from the past, but I'm comfortable enough. But the person that I was once then, I was a mess. I was, definitely a work in progress, I guess, or a work in I was just stagnant. I was a liar. I was not trustworthy in any capacity of the word. And I never thought that I would accomplish anything. I never thought I had a lot of dreams and hopes, but I never thought that there would be anything that I could really aspire to have or obtain. I was just a mess. I was just a whole mess. I was like 110 pounds soaking wet, kind of like couch hopping. I remember even riding the trains because my mother was just like, I'm not dealing with this, rightfully so.
I mean, how did you get there though? Because obviously it took a while to get there, right? Or did you immediately start using and get there? Because you obviously we don't, unless had parents that were addicted to drugs and were born with a physical addiction, we usually acquire it as we go through life. What happened there?
So my parents were my father was an addict, mostly with alcohol, but to what I understand, he also used other substances like cocaine and other stuff he dibbled and dabbled in, but he wasn't like super dependent on it. My mother never had any addictions, but they were really great parents. They were pretty present. I had some stuff go on growing up, but as parents, they did their best. But initially what brought me into addiction was I have an autoimmune disease called Sjogren's syndrome, which is a little similar to lupus, and it causes a lot of joint pain. And I started seeing a pain management doctor, and they started to prescribe me Percocets, and it skyrocketed. it just went crazy after that. I became very dependent on the pain medication. I was at the end, so when I made the switch to start using drugs, I was taking 270 milligrams of OxyContin 3 times a day. And I was mixing it with like fentanyl. It was really bad. It was really, honestly, I do not know how I'm standing.
So did it go like, because obviously we talk a lot about in Recovered Life about how, you know, that it's almost a hereditary and energetic disease. We get it from, you know, we inherit that, right? This phenomenon of craving, all this other stuff. But so many people now, Ennovy, are talking about, you know, it's not necessarily street drugs.
Yeah.
It's prescription drugs that get them onto street drugs. Did you just feel like the doctors were just like not present? They're just giving it to you and not seeing what's happening to you?
Yes. So it was literally like you're going to the doctor to get your drugs. That's exactly how I felt after a while. And I could tell them this isn't working anymore. I'm still in pain. And they would be like, all right, we're just going to up your dose. And then they would just kind of keep increasing it or change it or give you like OxyContin with Percocet or oxycodone with like they were just mixing and interchanging. And it just got to a point where I was running out of my prescriptions and they actually started to kind of catch on to that. And I'm not sure how they do it in other states, but there's like it's been so long, but there's this list, like a FDA list. And because I was constantly running out of my prescription, I was flagged. When I was flagged on this list, that's when I was just like, okay, this isn't working anymore. They're not going to prescribe me anything else. So I need to figure something else out. And a friend of mine was like, well, heroin and cocaine are like the same thing. The only difference is that this is what I had in my head, but the only difference is really just that they're sold outside of, you know, and the stigma. And I was like, all right, fine. So we're just going to start doing that. And it was significantly less expensive because I was still, even with the prescriptions, I was buying like on the street, I was buying pills. And the heroin and the cocaine was way less. I would interchange and intermix all of those things together. So it took some time to get there, but when it got there, it just spiraled out of control. It was really bad.
When did you realize, because obviously you go there and sometimes it's you know, I tell people with addictions, like sometimes you get to a point where there's stages of it, right? Where like, oh, it's like a train. I said, you know, the door opens, you can get off, but you choose not to. And you know, you go, and then each stop is worse and worse and worse till it gets to a place where you realize that you're not even making the decision to drink and use. You're just drinking and using. Do you remember that point when you had the realization that, oh my gosh, I'm not in control here of this. This is in control of me?
Yes. I went on vacation. I was in Puerto Rico for it was a family member's event. And I remember that I ran out of my prescription and I was so sick. And there's an area in Puerto Rico called La Perla, and it's very dangerous. And I was able to somehow finagle one of my family members going over there to get me drugs. And that's when I realized that this is completely out of control. And that I can't just stop, because if I stop, I'm going to be sick. And I remember laying in bed waiting for them to bring me this. And I felt such shame. And then in the process, my aunt had called me, and nobody knew what was going on with me, but my aunt had called me and she was like, oh, I actually have some Percocet from my surgery. Like, she thought she was being helpful. She didn't know that I was dependent on this. And she ended up giving it to me. And obviously I felt a lot better. But even with that, right? So I knew, and this is something I've never shared this with anybody. Not even the people I was on vacation with didn't even know that I had asked my cousin to do this. So I remember my aunt gave me the medication, and I still wanted the drugs as well. And I still waited for them to bring me the drugs. So it kind of clicked in my head, we have a problem. We have a really, really, really big problem here. But I wasn't ready to stop. It wasn't.
How long did it take from having that realization of the awareness that maybe something's not right to, wow, it's really not right?
It was about a year. It was about a year. So I had a lot of crazy moments. I had a really, really horrible, I had stolen once. From what really did it for me was maybe 6 months later, I had stolen my mother's rent money, and I helped her look for it. And it was the most shame I've ever felt. And just in case anybody's wondering, I did finally pay her back. I'm kidding. I did. But it was probably the most shame I've ever felt, because I really helped her look for this money. I was picking up the cushions. I was looking through bags, and this whole time I had it in my pocket. And the manipulation that I came to was just, it was like I was the devil. I'm helping my mom look for this rent money that I have in my pocket, and the rent was due. And I just didn't care. I had no care. I had no concern for anything, even the rent. And that was kind of when she caught on to that. She was just like, I can't keep doing this with you anymore. And, now looking back, it was probably the best decision. But it was around that time where I really lost control. And then 6 months after that was when I kind of had my moment where I was like, I need this. This got to stop. This is it.
We always talk, and a lot of times on the live stream for Recovered Life, we talk about the moment in which things change and you're stuck, and you just can't get unstuck. And you're just in that cycle over and over and over again. And I know for me with alcohol, there was a decisive moment where I felt like I had a divine intervention, right? Where I call it a supernatural intervention, and I know your story's interesting regarding that. So I'd like to talk with you about that, because a lot of people won't ask for one and they don't get one, right? And a lot of people have a garden variety one where they don't even realize they've had one. Like on the live stream, we talk to people all the time. I'm like, wow, you accidentally called your friend and not your dealer, and he was in recovery too. Like, that is a supernatural intervention. And my thing, what happened? Take us back to that day and that time where you're like, you know what? Something's going to shift here.
So it was actually my birthday. It was February 3rd, 2015. And I was experiencing withdrawal symptoms, and I was just feeling like I can't do this anymore. I want to kill myself. And my dealer called me and was like, hey, I got some new stuff. Do you want to try it? And of course, I jumped at the opportunity, of course. And something in me, however, felt a lot of guilt. And while I was waiting for him to show up at my house, I called a rehab. And I said to myself, if they answer, I'll go. I'll go. But I knew they weren't going to answer. It was like 7:30 or 8:30 at night, some weird time like that. And I left a message. And I remember I was in the bathroom and I looked up and I said, God, I'm giving you 20 days. I don't know why I came up with this number for the life of me. I don't know why. And I said, I'm giving you 20 days. And if in 20 days you don't get me into some sort of rehab, I'm going to kill myself. And 20 days later, on February 23rd, 2015, I was sitting on the bathroom floor. During those few weeks, I went through a bender, like a complete bender of drugs. I had overdosed a few times, ended up in the hospital, left the hospital. It was a mess. But on February 23rd, I was sitting on the bathroom floor, and I had pills in one hand and the phone in the other hand. And I remember I looked up and I took a deep breath and I started to put the pills in my mouth. And in that moment, it was like 5:30 at night, the phone rang. And it was the rehab. And, sorry. that was a very supernatural moment for me. It was definitely the creator telling me, you tested me, huh? And here I am to deliver. And she's the woman, I'll never forget, she seemed almost frantic. And she was like, hi, we have a bed available. Is there any way that you can get here now? And I remember just leaving. I just called a cab, I left, and I went to rehab. And I remember my withdrawal symptoms were so terrible, they had to sedate me. And I said to myself, if I can get through this part, I'm going to dedicate my life to recovery. And that is where we are now.
That is so amazing. You know, isn't it weird, because the 10-year sober you looks back on that, and doesn't it seem like you participated in it, right? Like, yes, you were there, you drove you answered the phone, you bought the pills, you participated in it, but something else was going on at the same time that you weren't necessarily participating. Like, it was taking you to where you needed to be. And it's almost a surrealistic experience looking back, because you're like, logically, this makes no sense. And I hear this a lot from people who need help. They're like, well, logic, it's just not going to happen. I got the dogs. I can't leave my job, right? I can't do all this other stuff. And I said, there is a way that will happen that won't involve you figuring it out.
Right. Right. Because I look back at that day and I feel like I was watching a movie. I didn't even feel myself moving. I didn't feel myself going. Somehow I ended up there at the rehab. Somehow I was filling out forms. Somehow somebody was telling me it's going to get better. And then somehow 28 days later, I was leaving the rehab. It was just like, I can't even tell you what I felt in the moment, because I just felt like I was watching myself do this. Almost like the creator was just kind of moving me through this process, and like knowing that there was no way that I can do this on my own, and I really had to depend on something outside of myself, because the addiction was so bad. But yeah, I agree.
You know what? It's like, I think people feel, and I'd love your thoughts on this, because I think people feel that they have to figure it all out. That on their own mental capacity, once they can put that puzzle together, Ennovy, you know what I mean? Like, once they put it together, then they're going to be able to, and then they can arrange the people, places, and things together long enough, then they'll be able to do it. But it's so the opposite of that, isn't it? I mean,
absolutely. Because honestly, it's in a moment where nothing is figured out at all, right? So everything is so messed up, but somehow or another, there are many people every day that find their way into recovery in a time and a place where everything is just so unraveled, and somehow or another we figure it out and we put it back together again. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's just one step at a time, just sometimes 1 minute by minute.
It is a minute by minute journey. I mean, okay, so now what? You're in this rehab. How do you become the person now who's working with other people that have addiction problems? Really, this as a career. Obviously, this was hard fought. Did you just go in and it just all clicked? Or did you have a hard time, like, having to recommit to surrendering over and over and over again, like many of us?
I've always been someone that, well, in the past, my old self was someone who would start things and never finish them. And I think it's very ironic that I fell into addiction, because being in recovery is something that you do every day. You have to decide to do it, right? So you're never really going to finish it, because it's just something that happens all the time. So I always thought it was very ironic of me. So what happened was I started, I was very ashamed when I got out of rehab. I was I had a lot of shame. And one day I had entrusted someone, I kind of just was like, hey, this is what I went through. This is what happened. This is why I wasn't around. And I remember she looked at me and she's like, why are you not telling people about this? Like, do you understand how big of a deal this is? So I was just like, I'm just not ready. You know, I'm not sure. There's a lot of shame. I'm Hispanic. In the Hispanic community, there's a lot of shame with addiction. And it's crazy because it runs so rampant in minority communities. And I started to kind of be more open about it. And I started to share about it on social media. And people started to reach out to me and tell me, hey, I lost somebody in addiction, or this inspired my cousin to want to go to rehab. And it became like this kind of ball. Initially, when I first started my career, I was working with children with disabilities. And as time went on, I still work with the youth, but young men coming in and out of jail, and also working with the justice system. But if they have addiction, I'm able to connect them to various services and work with them one-on-one. So it just kind of like was slow built. But as I started to share more about it within my jobs and then within the social media, it kind of just took off. And now what we do is we do live streams, of course, on TikTok. And people will connect with me and ask me to connect them to different rehabs. I actually have a young lady going into a rehab today. And to date, we've been able to help 75 people outside of the regular job. Yeah. So it's been a journey, and it was a slow journey because it took a lot of convincing of myself that it was okay to share this. There's no shame in this. Addiction is a disease of the mind, the body, the soul, the spirit, you know, and there's no shame in it. And I started sharing about it, and we're helping others now.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I mean, you know, I think a lot of people, there is a lot of shame in addiction because you don't want to feel that you're different from other people, right? And a lot of people think still in 2025 that addiction is some sort of moral issue. It's some sort of character issue, right? And I think a lot of it is because what we sometimes have to do in addiction when we're there, and everybody has a bad experience, it seems like, with somebody who's been an alcoholic or addicted to drugs. So I kind of understand it on a superficial level, but there's so much more going on with people that have addiction. I'd love for you to jump in here about the transformation, because I think a lot of people, you know, you're working with other people and obviously you see that they can transform. We were just talking about this before, and we'll talk a little bit about on the after the show about sometimes, like, you know, I can see it sometimes. Like when I'm working, I see it. It's right there. Like I see where the healing is for them, that you just have to make that step through recovery. Did you feel, because obviously it was a journey to get to where you are. It just didn't happen in 5 minutes.
Right.
Were there times where you thought, well, you know what? It's just not going to work out for me. Like maybe, okay, I got sober, but I'm miserable, but maybe that's it. Like what I call, it's like grace ran out. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like grace ran out. What did you do in those moments? Did you have any moments like that?
I keep myself really busy, but yes, I definitely did. I remember once, I think it was when my father passed away, where I felt numb, just very numb. I was a new mom. I just felt like life was a roundabout, and that's where some of the suicide ideation came back, and I kind of played with the idea. I think a lot of it had to do with maybe some postpartum I was going through, but when my father passed away, I just felt like I lost my best friend. And that was when I really had to hone in, because I did feel the cravings kind of kicking back in. And being a new mom, I knew I would be able to get the medication again. I knew that I can somehow manipulate a doctor and get the prescriptions again. And I had to definitely connect with my therapist, let my therapist know, hey, this is what I'm feeling. I had to be very honest with myself first. And I also had to be very honest with my therapist and let him know, like, this is something I'm really struggling with. And we kind of had to take some steps back to go forward. But I think that was probably the most difficult moment that I experienced while in sobriety, for sure.
Yeah, I think getting other help, whether you're in a 12-step group or, a church group or however you get sober, I think, exploring other help, because there's going to be ups and downs, right? Like there's going to be ups and downs in the transformation. Sometimes you wake up and you feel good. Other times you don't feel good. What I really love about you is anytime you ever have a problem, if I hear you on TikTok, you're always really talking about the solution, about what actions you need to take in order to get out of that feeling. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because a lot of people feel stuck. They feel like, hey, this is going to be forever. I'm always going to feel stuck. And I try to tell people, no, you know what? You're going to feel stuck a lot in your recovery. It's okay to feel it. It's what you do with it is really
Right.
the important part.
I'm really against the victim mindset. That's easy for me to say, being on like the outside looking back in. I've always been a very solution. Oh, no, that's not true. I was going to say I've always been a solution oriented person, but I wasn't. I think that I've made a decision to be a solution oriented person. It was a choice I had to make. Like people say like happiness is a choice, and I believe that too. Like you have to make the decision to want these things. So for example, with happiness, you're not always going to feel happy, but I think that you have to make the decision to always work on the aspects of your life to make yourself happy, or do things that give you joy, or give you purpose, just give you purpose. So I just feel that when it comes to life, you have to want to be okay. Because again, you're not always going to be happy. You're not always going to be excited about things. I think that that's a far-fetched way of thinking. But if you make the decision to want to find a solution and keep working on yourself and keep self-evaluating, maybe that's just what works for me. It's just a choice that I've made, and I try my best to share about that.
I love that. Because you are the chooser at the end of the day, right? Like this is the thing that I think a lot of people think. They believe that their feelings and their thoughts and, that addiction thinking, they believe that that is them. But really, as you get sober, you realize that that's not you.
At all.
That's not you. And you have the power to choose what you want to do.
Right.
You don't have to listen to those voices that are in there.
And I think also learning that I'm in control, right? So I am completely in control of every aspect of my life. And there's a lot of purpose and power in that when you're able to say, like, I'm in control. This may hurt. This experience may hurt, that I'm going to choose to not use drugs anymore, right? So the pain may be going through withdrawal symptoms, having to go to therapy and hear things that you don't want to hear, or, kind of, you're going to be presented with yourself for sure. And that can be really uncomfortable. But at the end of the day, we are in control of the choices that we make. And that gives a great deal of power to the self, that you choose everything from here on out. Your drugs are no longer in control of you. You are now in control of your own self. And that gives you the power to do whatever you want to do. And there's something really powerful and encouraging about that.
There is, absolutely. What would, in closing here, what would be your message to people who just feel trapped and feel that they can't do it? They go, I'm looking at Ennovy and she's got all of her stuff together and looks so happy and everything. That's her. Yeah, Damon, you're sober. That's you. I see it in other people, but I really just don't think it's possible for me. And I talk to people all the time. They're like, it's just not possible. What is your message to that person right now that might be listening to this?
That recovery is definitely possible. And I know that that's easy, right, for me to say, but I would tell people, just consider it. Just think about it. Just a small consideration to what recovery could bring. And I always tell people, imagine what your life would be like sober, and write that down. sometimes when you write things down, they become very real. And that may stick in their head, and it may remind them that this is definitely possible. But I always tell people who really say like, no, I don't think I could do this. I always ask them, just give it a consideration, just give it some thought. And then I try to check back in. So I would just say, consider it.
That's such a great message. Thank you so much, Ennovy. I mean, this has been an amazing, I feel inspired when I talk to you and when I watch your live streams. Guys, we're going to put how to get in touch with her and how to get, follow her on TikTok. We're going to put that all in the show notes. And if you're a Recovered Life Plus subscriber, you're going to get the after the show that we're doing right after this. So hold on, Ennovy, and we're gonna go after the close of this. We're gonna do after the show. Head on over to Recovered Life TV to find out more about her and more about recovery. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Bye.
Hey, if you like this episode, think about supporting us by becoming a Recovered Life Plus member. At Recovered Life TV, we're not just delivering premium recovery resources, we're empowering you with the knowledge and tools that make a real difference in the quality of your recovery. By subscribing, you gain access to ad-free content, expert insights, exclusive video and audio segments, special projects, plus so much more, all while supporting our mission to spread the recovery message far and wide. Whether you're seeking to deepen your understanding or stay updated on the latest addiction and mental health recovery trends, Recovered Life Plus is for you. Subscribe now and start living your best recovered life. Just go to recoveredlife.tv and become a Plus member today.